Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. This morning, I would like to ask you to turn with me in your Bibles to the book of the Psalms. And we're going to look at and dilate upon the 137th Psalm. It is a psalm for David, but a psalm of Jeremiah. So we want to look at that in the context of our subject this morning, the great Euphrates dried up. The drying up of the Euphrates River. Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept. When we remember Zion, upon the willows in the midst of it, we hung up our harps. For they who had captured us asked us of the words of a song. And they who had led us away asked for a hymn, saying, "Sing for us some of the odes of Zion." How can we sing the song of Yah in a strange country? O Jerusalem, if I forget thee, let my right hand be forgotten. Let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, if I do not remember thee. I set not Jerusalem foremost as the chief object of my joy. Remember, O Yah, the children of Edom, who in the day of Jerusalem said, raise down its foundation. Our daughter of Babylon, the miserable. Happy he who shall render thee thy recompense for what thou hast done to us. Happy he who shall seize and dash thy infants against stones. That's the word of Yah as read in the Septuagint Holy Scriptures. The rivers of Babylon, as the children of Judah sat there. The prophet Jeremiah uses distinctive vocabulary choices, the diction of which captures the concerns of his people who were in captivity at that time. There is a preponderance of meanings that relate to the horrors of our own experiences of slavery, which as a people we know only too well. As we analyze the literary diction of this passage, we notice that the passage reveals and establishes both the tone and the characterization of the black man's experience away from his home in Israel and in Africa, because he migrated from Israel to Africa, many of our people. And so there has been a dejection wherein many scholars and theologians have taken away the efficacy of the scriptures, in that the teachings of Yeshua and the apostles have not brought about the desired outcome as they should. Yeshua himself indicated that the disciples should have gone forward with the work and teach all that he had taught them to all nations and baptize them in the name of Yeshua. But that's not what the churches teach. John the apostle on the island of Patmos said it this way: I was in the Spirit in Yah's day, and I heard behind me a great voice, as of a trumpet saying, I am the Aleph and the Tav, Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And what thou seest, write in the book and send it to the 7 assemblies. That's the churches which are in Asia, unto Ephesus, unto Smyrna, unto Pergamos, and unto Thyatira, and unto Sardis, and unto Philadelphia, and finally to Laodicea. This is the last day church. John, write what you see. Write it down. And make sure, John, that all the assemblies from Ephesus to the time of Laodicea, they will know what you have seen because I have shown you all this. So the church should not be in ignorance of anything. And John did write it down. And John says, the one who spoke to me, he had hair like wool and he had feet like burning brass. And John took this to the churches, and perhaps I'm asking myself this question: why is it then that the church of Laodicea is so ignorant of what John saw? Why? The 7 assemblies, they were important to Yeshua. And Jeremiah wants you to know that sometimes it's only when we are in captivity that we remember these things. If we ever forget what slavery has done to our people, might the ink in your pen stop flowing? Because we've got to write these experiences. If we forget the British slave ship captain, now we know as John Newton how he took our ancestors to the ports of Bristol and to Liverpool. And there were times when he threw some of them overboard because they were sick. If ever we forget that, then we would have lost our history. People taken from West Africa and brought to these shores. And then later on, he was able to write, because it was only then that he recognized how amazing grace is. And perhaps it could have been titled Amazing Race of People, because we wonder how we survived it. But if we remember Zion, it was because we had forgotten how righteousness in Zion operated under King David. We had forgotten that. So if we forget Zion, if we forget the Windrush generation and the migration that took place from the Caribbean to Britain and to the Americas, and what happened to us and how they mistreated us and put us in cotton fields and put some of us on reservation and did experiments, scientific experiments on. If we ever forget that, by the rivers of the Mississippi and the rivers of the Thames and the Severn in England, if we ever forget those experiences, then we would have done injustice to our own selves. By the rivers of Babylon. And so we want to take that foundational diction and make it the center of our subject today, the drying up of the Euphrates. And today's study is intended to early identify a geographic feature, namely the Euphrates River, wherein we will analyze its prophetic significance. It points us to a particular location. Therein, the study today is both synchronic and diachronic, with empirical and prophetic overtones. The Hebrew children, that's our ancestors, they sat by the waters of Babylon, the Euphrates and the Tigris. They hang their harps, Jeremiah tells us, in the willow trees in sorrow as they reflect upon life in Zion, even as some of us reflect upon what life was like back in the West Indies, back in our hometowns. And so our captors, the British and the Americans, they mocked us. And they asked us to sing a song for them because they well knew that from those ages we were singers. And even when we came to America, we sang. And Michael Jackson did oblige. And Sam Cooke did oblige. Otis Redding did oblige. And they sang. Smokey Robinson did oblige. Aretha Franklin did sing. But we took all our songs out of the assembly and we sang for them in a very strange land, even as our captors, our slave masters, mocked us and asked us for the hymns of the sanctuary of Yah, and we sang them in their assemblies. Oh, if we ever forget Zion, if only we could remember. And so that synchronic relationship is one of two things that exist at the same time. And so in the context of our subject today, we're talking about ancient Babylon and we're talking about Mr. Babylon. That's the synchronic nature of our subject. And so the diachronomy shows when the change of the word happened. When did it happen? Therein, the diachrony identifies the historical linguistics of Babylon. As such, we want to look at the meaning, the significance of the drying up of the Euphrates River, because we're watching the drying up of the Euphrates River, because in Revelation chapter 16 and verse 12, the word is very clear that at the end time, that great river will dry up. The hydrology of the marshes that surround that place, the ecology of the region is now barren. And the great river is drying up. The tributaries that once flowed in it, they too have dried up. The Euphrates is one of the longest rivers, running a course of about 1,700 miles. And then it confluences with the Tigris, runs through Turkey, runs through Syria, runs through Babylon, and empties itself in that region. And so this morning, it is of interest to us. The aquatic vegetation, which includes the marsh, the papyrus, all these are drying up in these great rivers. And so the dikes and the dams that have been built to distribute the water to the various regions, they are now experiencing the parched conditions of prophecy. That's what we're dealing with this morning. By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, and we remember Zion. So as we reflect upon our experiences, what will it take for us, the descendants of slaves, to be driven back to the Creator and to recognize that our duty in life is to serve Him and to seek first the kingdom, and all the things that we desire in life, they will be added subsequently. That's the word of Yah. But that echo, that theme keeps coming to us. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. That's Revelation 16 and verse 12. What is John saying? The kings of the east. Are we talking about Japan? Are we talking about Turkey? Are we talking about China? The kings of the east are making their way. But in order to understand the prophetic nature of the text, we've got to go back to the history and study the history of the Euphrates and indeed of Babylon. So I'm going to ask you to join me in chapter 5 of the book of Daniel. Chapter 5 of Daniel. Daniel chapter 5. And the word says, King Belshazzar made a great supper for his 1,000 grandees, and wine was set before the 1,000. And as he was drinking, Belshazzar gave an order upon tasting the wine to bring the vessels of gold and silver, which Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had brought out of the temple in Jerusalem, and that the king and his nobles and his concubines and his wives should drink out of them. These were holy vessels that Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple in 586 BC and took them to Babylon and put them in his storehouse. But now this Belshazzar took them out, holy vessels, and began to use them as common vessels, the word said. Accordingly, the vessels of gold and silver, which had been taken out of the temple of Yah at Jerusalem, were brought, and the king and his nobles and the concubines and his wives drank out of them. If only we would remember Zion. And having drunk wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver and brass and wood and stone. At that very hour, there came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the lamp on the plastering of the wall of the king's palace. And the king beheld with astonishment the joint of the end that was writing, whereupon the king's countenance changed. His thoughts troubled him, and the joints of his loins were loosened, and his knees smote against the other. And the king cried aloud to bring the astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers to explain to him what was happening. To say he was frightened is mild. The word doesn't say it here, but I'm almost convinced myself that the man here, Belshazzar, soiled himself. Everything about his body changed. His countenance changed. And by the time Daniel arrived to interpret the dream, there was no improvement in his countenance. His complexion was pale. Because he was doing something that he ought not to have done. Drinking out of these golden vessels, so that the night that Babylon was destroyed. And so we must use this depiction of Babylon, ancient Babylon, to understand what will happen in Mr. Babylon. Because if we turn to Isaiah the prophet, and we read in chapter 44 and verse 28, it says, "Who said to Cyrus, I will give wisdom, and he shall execute all my pleasure? Who said to Jerusalem, thou shalt be rebuilded, and the house dedicated to me I will found." 150 years prior to this, Yah had named Cyrus, who was not even born then, that this king would come and would be the one responsible not only to defeat Babylon, this impregnable city, at least that's how they perceived it, and overthrow Babylon, and then the captives, our ancestors who were in Babylon, who migrated, in some of them to Africa and some to Babylon by way of slavery, they would return under the leadership and the tutelage of Ezra, Zerubbabel, and Nehemiah. That's our history, and we need to understand that. Because this gospel of the kingdom must be preached to all the world, and then the end will come. So, chapter 45, come with me there also. The word says, "Thus saith Yahweh Elohim, for mine anointed, for Cyrus, whose right hand I have taken hold of, that nations may listen before him. I will break the power of kings. I will open gates before him." These are the gates that were underwater of the Euphrates that made sure that nobody could come up. Yah says, "I'm going to open these gates and let Cyrus come through the Euphrates and destroy Babylon." That's what happened then. Herodotus, the historian, said that the walls of Babylon were so thick that they had horse races. They had races on top of the wall. That's how thick they were, making the city impregnable. But now we see the very same Euphrates that Cyrus dredged on the night that Belshazzar had his party for his nobles and his grandees, and came up through the riverbed of the Euphrates and took Babylon. So, students of the word, when you read Revelation 16 and verse 12, that the Euphrates is going to be dried up, or is drying up, in the same way that Cyrus dried it up, you know that a deliverance is coming for the people who are dispersed. That's us. This is the second Exodus. We are going back to our homeland because the Euphrates is now drying up. We've got to understand the vegetation. Well, let me remind you of the Euphrates. Come with me to the book of Genesis. And we will look at chapter 2, Genesis chapter 2. And we will begin at verse 10. Because sometimes if we forget our history, we cannot ascertain where it is leading us. Genesis chapter 2, that's Bereshit. In verse 10, now a river issued out of Eden to water the garden. Then it was divided into 4 heads. So the source of this river we're talking about is from that garden of civilization. Are you with me? And the word says it is now drying up. It issued out of Eden to water the garden, thence it was divided into 4 heads. The name of the first is Phison. This is that which encircles the whole country, Evelat, where there is gold, and the gold of that country is good. There also is the carbuncle and the Precian stone, and the name of the second is Gihon. You remember Gihon? That's exactly, where David had his son Solomon to be anointed at Gihon. There is also that which encircleth of the second river, Gihon. This is that which encircleth the country of what? Ethiopia. And the third river, the Tigris. This is that which floweth down over against Assyrian, the Assyrians. And the fourth river is the Euphrates, which is our subject today. So we see the source of the river Euphrates is coming directly from the Garden of Eden, which we know was a fruitful place. And therefore, if this source is drying up now, surely you don't have to conjecture who is responsible. Because the word says that the angel that came out of the temple, he poured his vial on the river Euphrates, and it is now drying up. And so the whole region, Iraq, Assyria, Turkey, they're experiencing drought in the region of where the Euphrates flow. And on that infamous night that Belshazzar had his banquet for his grandees, the word said as he began to disrespect Yah and impiously drank out of those golden vessels, he saw a hand, a bloodless hand, writing on the wall. If only we could recognize that the drying up of the Euphrates River is that hand again writing on the wall of this civilization to say you have been weighed in the balance and you are found wanting. And Revelation put it well. It says, Babylon is fallen. Fallen is Babylon, Mr. Babylon. So we use the physical Babylon to interpret what is happening or is going to happen in the mystery Babylon. Are you with me? So the sixth angel poured out his vial. So perhaps we need to establish who are these people that were in Babylon. Because you heard me said earlier that quite a number of them were our descendants, meaning they were of bronze complexion. And I might hasten to add that the black man is not an extreme type. There are various shades of him because he can produce from jet black to white. That's who he is. Other people can only produce themselves, but he can produce different variation and coloration. That's who he is. And so come with me to Genesis, that's Bereshit, chapter 10. And we will read a few verses from verse 3 to 5, I should say. The word here says, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmath, and the sons of Javan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dobanim. These were the isles of the Gentiles divided in the lands, every one after his tongue, after their families in the nation. Did you get that? Let me do that again for emphasis. And the sons of Gomer, these are the descendants of Japheth. Remember, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So Moses here is writing about Japheth. And Moses uses the term before anybody else uses it. He says that the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, meaning that today's Ashkenazi, 92% of which are said to make up the population of Jews in Israel. Moses, who took dictation from Yah on Mount Sinai, says they are Jews. Did he say that? No, he said they are Gentiles. So who would you rather believe? A man who took dictation from Yah on Mount Sinai, or would you rather listen to some rabbinical utterance? Well, I'm more inclined to listen to Moses. Moses says, it is from this line of people, Japheth line of people, these people moved out. These are Khazar that went to Caucasus Mountain there. And that's why they're called Caucasian. He says they are Gentiles. So I beg to suggest, if these people are Gentiles, as Moses seemed to be suggesting, then we must look elsewhere for the Jews. And remember, all Jews are Israelites, but not all Israelites are Jews. So when we hear people say they are Jewish, they are using the suffix ish to validate something that they're not. Ish means something that is not an exactitude. But this morning in our study, we are dealing with the full-blood Jewish people. And that's, the Bible says, is our ancestors. And perhaps, have you ever wondered why Moses himself remained undetected in Egypt for 40 years while living among the pharaohs and the people who were all black? Have you ever wondered why he remained undetected? And have you ever wondered why the Messiah himself, having spent part of his early life in Egypt, the land of Ham, remained undetected when they were looking for him? among black people. Have you ever wondered why? And John was told to write these things down. John says, I saw him, and he had hair like wool, and he had feet like burning brass. And the church of Laodicea is behaving as if it hasn't read this. Why? Can't do that. And so let me call you to join me in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 16. And let's read verses 14 and 15. And what does it say? Jeremiah 16 and 14 and 15. It says what? It tells us about what? The second Exodus. Isn't that what it says? It talks about the second Exodus. Let me read it for you. It says, therefore, behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, that it shall no more be said, Yahweh liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. He says that was a small fry. The first Exodus was a small fry, was nothing compared to this one that is coming. Verse 15, but Yahweh liveth, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from the lands whither he had driven them, and I will bring them again in their land that I gave their father. Behold, I will send for many fishers, saith Yahweh, and they shall fish them, and after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill, and out of the holes of the rock. He says the second Exodus, which is this is what I'm talking about, that when you see the drying up of the Euphrates River taking place, you know a kind of situation that developed with Cyrus is about to happen to deliver his people. And these world governments can do nothing about it, because Yah is the one who is delivering his people. But let me tell you why we got there in the first place. One, Jeremiah tells us in Psalm 137 that we had forgotten Zion. We had forgotten Yah. And so this explains this for us in Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 68. And Yah shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spoke unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Egypt here means house of bondage. Deuteronomy is saying, if you forget Zion, if you turn away from Yah, and turn away from your father Abraham and stop keeping the commandment and referring to yourself as a Sabbath Sunday keeper and for abandoning the feast day, he said, I will send you back to Egypt in ships. And therefore, you need to pull up your own levers and ask yourself the question, do you know of any other group of people, of all the people groups, do you know of any other group of people who were brought to the Americas and to England in chains on ships? Do you know of any? So who then is Moses here talking about? Moses himself, as you know, was king at the Cushite before he went to Midian. So the biblical history is the bronze man history. Can't you see that? And so when you see the Euphrates drying up, you know that your deliverance is nigh. That river that came directly out of the Garden of Eden. So come with me also to Zephaniah, because you may have missed that. Zephaniah, and I want to look at chapter 1 first. Chapter 1 of Zephaniah. The word here says, the word of Yah, which came to Zephaniah, the son of Cush. Now, you can use that word Cush as an adjective to describe the black man. He's the son of Cush, Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Ezekiah in the days of Josiah, and the son of Ammon, king of Judah. Did you get that? The prophet here, Zephaniah, is letting you know, he's tracing his ancestry, and he wants you to take note of it, that he is the son of Cushi. And he traces his lineage to Ezekiah, one of the good kings of Judah. That's him. And I want to hold it there because there's something else I want to show you so you really understand what I am saying to you. If you come with me to Jeremiah, and we are going to look at chapter 40. Jeremiah chapter 40, because you know Jeremiah was one of the prophets who preached about the captivity of Judah, but they didn't listen to him. In fact, they threw him into a pit, and he was saved by an Ethiopian man. You know that, right? So chapter 40, then the word says in verse 5, now while he was not yet gone back, he said, go back unto Gedaliah, the son of Ahimaaz. And you notice as Zephaniah was tracing his ancestry, he mentioned Gedaliah. We just read that in Zephaniah chapter 1. But here in Jeremiah chapter 5, you see that Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, whom the king of Babylon had made governor of Judah. This descendants of Cushi, of Zephaniah, in this time, before they were taken to Babylon, was made king by Nebuchadnezzar of the land of Judah. It's in the word. Are you with me? So who was he left to tend? Well, let me read a few more verses there. It says, he was made governor of Judah and dwell with him among the people, or go wherever it seemeth convenience unto thee to go. So the captain of the guard gave him an allowance and present and let him go. Then went Jeremiah unto Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, to Mizpah, and dwelt with him among the people that were left in the land. The word says Jeremiah was living with a black man, because he himself was black. Now, when all the captains of the forces which were in the fields, even they and their men, heard the king of Babylon, and made Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, governor of the land, and had committed unto him men and women and children, and of the poor of the land, of them that were not carried away captive to Babylon. Did you get that? Did you understand that? Gedaliah, this descendants of Zephaniah, who earlier told us that his father was Cushi, was made governor of Judah to attend unto the poor that were left in the land. Pick this up again in Jeremiah chapter 24. Let me explain to you what is happening here. Jeremiah chapter 24. The word says, Yahweh showed me, and behold, 2 baskets of figs were set before the temple of Yahweh, after that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away captive Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and the princes of Judah, with the carpenters and the smiths, and Jerusalem had brought them to Babylon. Understand what's happening here. The professional people and the regal line of people were taken into captivity, and some migrated to Africa. But the poor, the destitute, the down and out were left in the land, and Gedaliah, the descendant of Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, was the one who was attending to them. Let me read that again. Jeremiah is shown 2 baskets of fruits, 2 baskets of figs was set before the temple of Yahweh, and Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away the captives Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and the princes of Judah, with the carpenter. Listen to the people who had the carpenters and the smith from Jerusalem, had brought them to Babylon. 1 basket had very good figs, even like the figs that are first ripe, and the other basket had very naughty figs, which could not be eaten. They were so bad. These are the poor people. So the poor that did not go into captivity, they were put under the care of Gedaliah. But the good ones, the rich Hebrew Negroes, they went to Babylon, and some migrated, even in the time of Yeshua, to Africa. It was there that they were picked up in West Africa, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Guinea, and in all those areas, and brought to the shores of America and in Britain and even Brazil and elsewhere, and ask us to sing, because they know we are gifted singers, because Yah had blessed us, because we used to sing in Zion. Now we only sing mostly in nightclubs by the rivers of Babylon. And so the river, those rivers in Babylon, they are now drying up, because Yah says, I'm going to round up my people, and I'm going to find a Cyrus, not the Cyrus of old, but Yeshua himself is going to deliver them. Are you with me? You better read Isaiah 11 in verse 11. Let's go there. Isaiah 11 in verse 11. And we will see what Yah is saying. Isaiah 11 in verse 11, it says, and it shall come to pass in that day, it's talking about the second Exodus, the spiritual Exodus. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahweh shall set his hand again. What? A second time, to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros, this is part of Egypt, and from Cush, that's Ethiopia and Sudan, and from Elam and from Sinai and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea, that's the Caribbean. I see nobody here from Europe. The Bible doesn't give any indication of any Jew, any Hebrew people coming from Europe to go to the land. He says that he doesn't say that. He gives you the place and time that this is taking place. And let's go back to Zephaniah so you can understand what I'm saying. And if I could only consolidate that point in your mind, you will begin to think very differently about who you are, rather than letting Constantine religion deceive you. Zephaniah, come with me to Zephaniah chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 9 and 10. For then will I turn the people a pure language, that's Hebrew. I know you like English, but English is a derivative from the language of Babylon. Because the word says, up until that point, the building of the tower, the world only spoke one language. So your ancestors spoke Hebrew. That's what the word is saying. For then will I return unto them a pure language, Hebrew, that they may all call upon my name of Yahweh, not Jesus, not God, to serve him with one accord. Remember in Acts chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost, they were in one accord calling up on Yah's name. That's where we've got to return to. Listen to verse 10. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed. What does dispersed mean? Scattered. He said, my people are scattered. They are the Ethiopian. These are my people. They are dispersed. Shall bring mine offering. What offering will they bring? They will bring the offering of the Ark of the Covenant that is in Axum in Africa. That's what they're going to bring to him. Because if you ever studied the history of your people, you will know that Solomon and Sheba had, that's the queen of Sheba, had a son, Menelik. And from that Menelik 1, there was a Menelik 2. Are you with me? And from that, we had who? Rasmakanan, generally known as Rastafari. That was the name of the prince before he was later crowned emperor of Ethiopia. That's the line of our people. We need to understand that. Are you with me? And so, if we forget our history, if we forget Zion, then, as I've said before, let the ink in our pen stop flowing so we cannot write. But we must write because others have written our history, and oftentimes they have written us outside of our own history, and they have given us something that is a lie. Our own library that was in Alexandria in Egypt was burnt down with all those great books. Are you with me? And they have written conjectured stories and have put into our minds that they are the people that they call the Jews. And we believe that. The church teaches that. So let's call up on the greatest of all witnesses, because you really want to know the truth. Come with me to the book of Azon. That's Revelation. And we're going to look at Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9. And the word here says, I know thy works and tribulation. Of course he knows. He's seen what we've gone through in the Americas, in the cotton fields, in the coal mines, in the gold mine. He knows we've built their penitentiary and we built their schools, and all they have given us is brainwash education, and they have treated us like fools. Yeshua knows that. And so you understand why the brother, the troubadour from Trenchtown, all he ever asked that you will sing that song, that redemption song, because in Revelation it said, and they all sung the song of Moses on the Lamb, that redemption song. It is all I ever asked. Because old pirate, yes, they took I and sold I to the merchant ships. Are you with me? And after they took I, they gave us brainwash education, and they treat us like fools. And we follow their lead. I remember our sister way back in the 70s, I believe it was 1978, and she came to England, and she said she had a boy, who was lollipop. She was sucking on straw. I'm talking about Millie Small. Are you with me? At that time, we were receiving all kind of pain and suffering in England. And she has a boy called Lollipop, and they offered her a contract, and she sang, "Again in a strange land." Oh, yes. They took us away. But Yeshua says, I know your works. I know your pain. I know your suffering. I know your tribulation, bronze people. Are you with me? I know your poverty. Do you know anybody else with poverty? Africa, the land of civilization, has the most resource in the world, yet it's the poorest country. Can you understand the logic of that? Huh? That's confused logic. He says, I know your poverty, thou art rich, and I know how thou art slandered by them. Did you hear that? He said, has anybody ever been as slandered as we are, as a people group? He says, I know you're slandered by them, which say they are Jews. He's saying, some say, there's a group of people saying they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Now, come on. It would be a little bit difficult if he had said they are of the church of Satan. He doesn't say that. He says they are the synagogue of Satan. That's what the word says. This is Yeshua speaking. Right? So you don't have to conjecture on that, what he's saying. And come with me also to Revelation 3 and verse 9. Behold, I will make them, the same group, that say they are Jews and are not. He said, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. That's us. I can't make it any plainer than that. I'm extracting out quotes from the Messiah himself. Moses tells us in Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 15 that a prophet is going to be raised up in the last day like unto him who is the Messiah. When he comes, hear him. Now, here it is. Moses says he's coming. And he's here, and he's now telling you, Moses already told us in chapter 10 of Bereshit, Genesis, that the Khazarian people are Gentiles, who many of which now claim to be Jews. Yeshua says, no, they are of the synagogue of Satan, but I'm going to let them come and worship before you. You are my dispersed people beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. This is the word of Yah. So I ask myself, preachers, teachers, bishops, pastors, why have you read this and have taught the people differently? Why? Truth is so offensive that you cannot preach it. It's the word of Yah. And we are told to preach it in season, and out of season. So the question is this. It's an ethical question. What do you think will happen when the world at large realizes that the downtrodden, the dejected, the rejected, the abused people that we call the Lazarus of society, they are indeed the people of Yah, the Jews? What do you think will happen? I tell you what will happen. The same thing that happened in Pharaoh's time. What did Pharaoh say? Pharaoh said, these people are multiplying. They're breathing too fast. Let's deal wisely with them. But you have been led to believe that it's somebody other than yourself. Are you with me? When Israel went down to Egypt because of the famine, Israel is only going to his brother next door. Oh, yes. And if you read your history, you will realize that the coloration of Egypt changed. When did it change? It changed after the death of Alexander the Great. After he did, his 4 generals took over, and Ptolemy took Egypt, and then the coloration changed to what it is today. But that's the land of Am. And perhaps you ought to know this too. It's imperative for you to know that the notion that they have taught you that all black people are the descendants of Ham, it's a fallacy. Many of our people are descendants of Shem. So you have the Shemite Negroes. And so slavery began in its tentative form when the Hebrew Israelites, the Negro, the bronze people, migrated from Israel and went to Africa, and the Africans began selling them with the cooperation of the Arabs, and they sold them to the merchants of Europe and the Americas. That's your history. That's what the word wants you to know. And it seems that Yah is saying enough is enough. Their probation is now at an end. So I'm drying up the Euphrates River just like Cyrus did and came up through the riverbed, and I'm going to destroy these Babylonians oppressors. Remember, the vessels that they drank out of were holy vessels. And the physical always comes before the spiritual. So the holy vessel that Yah is dealing with, it's you and I. He says they're messing with my holy vessels. Because he sometimes referred to people as vessels. Remember Paul? He says Paul is a holy vessel. And that's what we need to learn. That Yahweh is about to deliver us from evil. Isn't that what he told us to pray? For thine is what? The kingdom, the power, and his glory. Are you with me? So, here we get it. The angel came out of the temple. Let's close on this. Revelation chapter 16. Revelation chapter 16. Well, let's go to 15 first. It says, and I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of Yahweh. And I saw, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire. This is the laver. Are you with me? And the laver was where the priests would go and wash themselves. The laver was not made, or, James referred to it like a looking glass. It's like a man who looks into a looking glass, and when he leaves the looking glass, he forget what he looks like. Isn't that what James says? He's saying, how can you look? James is making the analogy that the word is a looking glass. If you look into the word and you see some of the things that you're doing are not right, you need to correct yourself. If you look in the looking glass and you see things on your face and you're going out on the street, you're going to fix yourself right to go into the street because you're going to face the public. Are you with me? So the laver is where the priest would go before he went into the most holy place. And he would look. Now here it is in Revelation. And I saw, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire. and them that had gotten the victory over the beast. Are you with me? He said, we, those of us who live faithfully, and if we stay faithful, he said, we will stand on the sea of glad at the laver. And that's a depiction of righteousness. That's what he wants you to know. And over the number of the name, they stand on the sea of glad, having the harp. Did you hear me? These are the same people who were in Babylon, and they were mocking them and destroying them and telling them to sing them a song of Zion. They now take their harps, and what are they doing there? They're playing the song of Moses. Are you with me? And they sing the song of Moses, not in a strange land. They're now singing it in Zion, not in the dance halls, not in the discotheques, but they're singing it in Zion. And so they sing the song of Moses, the servant of Yahweh, and the song of the Lamb, saying, great and marvelous are thy works, O Yahweh, El Shaddai, just and true thy ways, O Yah, King of Saints. It's really not King of Saints, but, it's King of Nations. Who shall not fear thee, O Yahweh, and glorify thy name? Who? All of us should. So let's go to chapter 16 now. And I heard a voice out of the temple saying to the seven angels, go thy way. Probation is over now. Go thy way. Just like in Noah's time, they was given 120 years. Go thy way now. Go thy ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of Yah upon the earth. Pour it out. And the first went and poured out his vial on the earth. And the earth fell noisome and grievous sore upon the men which at the mark of the beast, and upon them worship is idol. And the second poured out his vial upon the sea. Now you got to understand what's going on here, because there's a distinction between the earth and the sea. And if we go to Revelation chapter 13, we see a distinction between the sea beast and the earth beast. You better come with me, because we need to understand it. Revelation chapter 13. And I saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Remember, beasts are kingdoms, having 7 heads and 10 horns. There have been 7 kingdoms over time. Shall I start with you? Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, Ottoman Empire. And we are told that the 7th will be the 8th at the end of time. So this beast here, right, comes up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his heads, upon his horns, 10 crowns, and upon his head, name is blasphemy. So we know this beast that comes out of the sea, sea meaning, according to Revelation 17 and verse 15, multitudes of people. That's where the beast comes out. So let's go to verse 11 now of the same passage. And I beheld another beast come out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake like a dragon. This is an earth beast. So we have to make a distinction between the earth beast and the sea beast, because the angel that come out of the temple is going to pour some plague on the earth beast and also on the sea beast. Are you with me? So come with me to Revelation chapter 12. The word says here that, verse 7, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared for her. This is talking about the pilgrims who were fleeing the Roman Catholic persecution. We call it the Reformation, and they fled. The word says that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angel fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found anymore. And the great dragon, that Satan, was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceived the whole world, he was cast out into the earth. Don't miss that. Satan was cast out where? into the earth. Remember, we just read in chapter 13 that there's an earth beast in verse 11. And his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of Eloah, and the power of his Messiah, for the accuser of the brethren is cast down, which accuse them before Eloah day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of his testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Now, verse 14, and when the dragon saw that he was cast to the earth, I want to emphasize that, the earth beast, he was cast to the earth, he persuaded the woman, the church, which brought forth the man-child, that's Israel. And you know the relationship between Israel and certain state. We'll come to that in a minute. And the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle. Did you hear me? Eagle. Who has the symbol of an eagle? Who has the emblem of an eagle as their coat of arms? The woman was given 2 wings as a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, and she was nourished for a time and half a time from the face of the serpent. Let me ask you the question, and you don't have to conjecture. When the pilgrims and the Lollards and all the people from Holland and Britain and Germany left fleeing persecution, where did they come to? The answer is easy. They came to Britain. Did they? No, they came to America. They came to the earth. And you say, hold on, elder, you're taking us too far. Let's read verse 16 and 17. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away in the flood. And the earth, this is the earth beast, help the woman, help the church. This is where the pilgrims fled, the earth. And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went wroth with the church. He's angry with the church and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. Why? Because they keep the commandment, including the feast day and the 7th-day Sabbath, and they have the faith of Yeshua. But guess what? Mr. Babylon, the woman, is about to fall. Why? Because, as I said earlier, the Euphrates is drying up, and it is a sign, an indicia, an indication that our deliverance is nigh. Babylon is fallen. We are about now prepared to sing that song of Moses and the Lamb. That's the song of deliverance, but you must first rehearse and practice. And that's why we come here each Sabbath, to do that. So if you ever forget what Yah has done for you, if you ever forget Zion, then you know that you will be put in captivity, and your captors will just mock you day and night, as they have done. But it's now time for us to return to our Father. Isn't that what he says? The word says, and the prodigal son came to himself. He came to his senses, and he says, I'll come home. And so my encouragement to you, will you come out of those denominations, those institutions, where leaven is taught and eaten rather than real bread, the manna that came down from heaven? Let it be that we ask him, let this day be what? Our daily bread. Let him feed us, and may we soar like an eagle, not like an owl that is partially sighted. For such we know that the Euphrates is drying up and our deliverance is near. In Yeshua's name I pray. Hallelujah.